Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. We're really excited to be continuing our Move Her Mind event series here in Minneapolis. Big thank you to the Megs and Britta for being our fabulous panelists, and big thank you to Mill City Running for hosting us. We're going to be having a great discussion, and I hope if you have the time, you hang around after to chat with our panelists. And with that, I will pass it off to our panelists.
Thanks, Megan. We joke that you can just say Megan and someone will respond because there's like 10 of us everywhere all the time. But I am Megan Murray. I'm with Believe in the Run. I am a co-host of the Move Her Mind event series. This is our 5th stop. We've never been to Minneapolis, so thank you for having us. We're very excited to be here. And I'll hand it off to my co-host.
And I am Megan Featherston, the other Meg of the Meg duo here, owner of Featherstone Nutrition. And we are on this tour with the attempt to bring conversations about women and running. So a couple years ago, Asics commissioned a study. The podcast is now out on Fuel for the Soul if you want to hear all from the PhD who ran the study, Dr. D. And what they were doing was looking at the gender gap in exercise and trying to identify some of the reasons why. And what they found was that women aren't moving as much as they want to be moving, and all the different variables about why that is happening. I think most of us in this room are probably moving our bodies more than some of the people in the study. So as we are talking through at different locations about some of the different pieces and parts that we need to be chatting about as women in the running community, we want to make sure that we're spreading all of this information to our friends, to our families, to people that we want to encourage to move with us, because we know that most of us are probably moving a little more than some of our counterparts. So tonight, we are going to take the topic, as my papers fall on the ground, of speaking with a pelvic health PT here. So we are very honored to have Britta Gauthier Aho, I think I got it, with us tonight. And I'll let her introduce herself and talk a little bit more about what she does for women from a physical therapy standpoint and pelvic health. And we're going to pick her brain and probably throw some nutrition stuff in there too. So go ahead, Britta.
Hey, everybody. It's so awesome to be here. Thank you for having me. I was drawn to the profession of pelvic PT because I'm a lifelong mover. Running, soccer, I taught group fitness for 10 years. So wanted to support people in living an active lifestyle. I was kind of funneled into pelvic health because I experienced my own pelvic health healing journey. About 10 years ago, I was living in Chicago and was very stressed. I was working a lot. I had just gotten out of PT school, and I ultimately was over-exercising and under-fueling, and ended up with amenorrhea, which is the lack of a menstrual cycle. It sent me down a rabbit hole of trying to heal my body and to regulate my hormones, which is a doozy. It's very overwhelming. Hormones affect so many systems in our body. And so it required a lot of lifestyle changes. I moved back to Minnesota, whoop, whoop, my hometown. And now I get to support people in these big life phases of hormone fluctuations, pregnancy, postpartum, of which I am 9 months. I have a baby boy at home, my first kid. So it's how I got here.
You're kind of living it right now. You know exactly what we're going to be talking about and all the different changes that happen with our pelvic floor, pelvic health, with pregnancy and beyond. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we'll start with pregnancy. Can you tell us maybe what are some of the biggest changes that someone has to make in training and in life when they are pregnant?
Yeah, pregnancy is a party of hormones. It all increases, particularly in the first trimester. Progesterone skyrockets, and that can cause fatigue and sometimes nausea. And so movement sometimes isn't going to happen because you're not up for it and you need to rest. Second trimester, I like to talk about relaxin. That's a hormone that causes loosening of the ligaments and the joints. And so I always recommend focusing on stability, particularly in the first and second trimesters, working on core strength, glute strength. Those are key muscles to stay connected to in those first parts of pregnancy. And then we'll get a little more into childbirth, but there are definitely some recommendations I have for preparing for that as well in the third try.
So when would you suggest that someone comes to you that is pregnant in the first or second trimester? Is there anything that someone could be experiencing that you feel like you could help with, or anything that maybe isn't, I hate to use the word normal, because I mean, what's normal about growing a human inside of our bodies? But if any like things that you'd be like, ooh, I'd really wish that that person would have come to me with some of those symptoms, I could have helped them with it, or like you said, like who would you wish, like, oh, I wish I could have helped that person?
Yeah, totally. Well, first of all, seeing a pelvic PT in pregnancy is not common. It's not regularly recommended by OBs or midwives. And there's a lot that we can do to help prepare for birth and postpartum and to improve your recovery. I usually would recommend somewhere around the second trimester, as baby is growing, to come in and see me. There are a few main symptoms that I tell patients to look out for, and those are pain anywhere. I think that one is obvious. Commonly hips, low back, the pelvis, and urinary leakage is another one. So if you're peeing your pants when you're exercising, like, this is not normal. And sometimes it can't be helped in pregnancy when baby's growing and pushing on your bladder. However, there are things that we can do to help. And it is a sign that potentially the load that you're placing on your body, that stress and strain, is too much for your body to withstand. And so there are modifications we can do. And the last one is heaviness or pressure. And so that can be a tough one to understand if you haven't experienced it, but kind of a fullness in the vaginal area, or like a general heaviness, discomfort in like the low belly. And that can be a sign that muscles are not engaging well enough to kind of hold and support your baby. Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is I really should have seen you a couple times in my life. But I'm curious, who in the audience has either been pregnant, is pregnant, has children? So probably 3/4 for anybody listening after. How many people saw or were recommended to go to a pelvic PT? 1, 2, 3, 4,
Nice.
5, 6.
Yeah.
Not very many, but hey, that's good. The 6 of you, that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, my kids are 8 and 9, and that just wasn't something that was ever told to me. But I'm listening to this, and I'm like, I just thought those were normal symptoms of being pregnant and growing a very large human in your belly, and maybe not. So hopefully, anybody here who might be in that situation later, or anybody listening after the fact, that's really helpful to know that maybe those things could be helped and make this journey a little more comfortable.
And so on that note, outside of not going to a PT, are there things that you see women doing during pregnancy that maybe set them back?
One thing that I think can be really hard is learning how to relax and loosen up. Childbirth is all about kind of getting our bodies out of the way and letting the uterus do the work of pushing the baby out, especially in the first stages of labor. And that is so tough. I could guess that, I mean, you're all athletes. You probably have tight muscle somewhere. And a lot of times it can live in the pelvic floor. And so I think education around those muscles. No one ever taught us about our pelvic floors.
I'm just learning, apparently. But so would it be useful, do you see patients come into your office to work with you to prepare for a smoother labor, to understand those connections, to learn how to engage those different muscles? Like you said, I mean, we've probably all gone to PT for an injury, and we were like, oh shoot, my glute was weak, or my glutes are weak. I need to do something about it. But
Yeah.
to understand that connection, we talk about like our glutes firing, right?
Yeah.
Understanding that connection to our pelvic floor. Like, do you find that could be useful for women to come visit and learn about all of that before
Yeah.
they go into labor?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are 3 layers of muscles in the pelvic floor. Did you know this? With multiple muscles in each layer. And so when someone says, just do a Kegel, it's like, it's not that simple. There are nuances. There are ways that you can contract the front of your pelvic floor versus the back. I call it the front door and the back door. These muscles control pee and poop. And how can you connect to those muscles differently? Our posture matters, and the way we hold our body, and how we breathe, how we coordinate with our diaphragm. Your pelvic floor is part of your core. So if you imagine the shape of a pop can, this is your core. So it's your whole midsection. And I think a lot of times we think it's just the abdominal wall. It's your abdominals, especially your deep abdominals, your obliques, your deep back muscles, and then the top and the bottom are your diaphragm and your pelvic floor. And it's all of those kind of navigating together in a balanced way. And so it's complex.
And so when someone comes to you wanting to strengthen themselves and get ready for the birth of their child, what can they expect when they come to you into your office?
Yeah. So in 3rd trimester, we do focus a lot on that birth prep. I would say hip mobility is super important. And so stretching the hips in all directions. Learning to coordinate your breath with your pelvic floor contraction. Well, and first of all, learning how to contract your pelvic floor, right? Like, where are those muscles? How do you squeeze them, lift them, and then also relax them? And so sometimes we work on an exhale breath with a contraction, and then an inhale breath with a relaxation, and then the opposite. And and we also do internal work. If you're not familiar with, it doesn't always have to be. If someone who's experienced sexual trauma or anything like that, we do not have to do internal exams, but we do use a gloved finger to palpate the pelvic floor muscles. How else are we going to know, right? How the muscles are engaging and relaxing. And sometimes, like I mentioned before, the muscles can hold tension. So we can actually work just like you would massage your tight quads after a run. You can learn to release and massage your pelvic floor. Yeah, it's critical sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine, for sure. So we talked a little bit about going through pregnancy and why it might be helpful to come see you or a pelvic floor PT. So let's talk about, okay, you've had this baby. Now we're all itching to get back out there and start running again and doing all the things that we love. So tell us a little bit about your experience with helping women return to run. Maybe some things we do wrong, some things we do right. I'm just going to let you fly with it.
Yeah. I think that can be really overwhelming. You go to your 6-week OB or midwife appointment, and they're like, you're cleared for everything. Really remembering that your body went through those 40 weeks of being pregnant and all those changes in your body. And so those first 6 weeks, I do really emphasize rest. Don't come to see me until 6 weeks. Bond with your baby and do the daily tasks of life and maybe get back to some walking. And then at 6 weeks, it's a good time to see a pelvic PT. Usually at that point, bleeding has stopped and you're medically cleared for movement. I still believe that waiting 3 months to run, this is hard to hear maybe for some of us, but waiting that 12 weeks to really start to build up your strength, build up your connection to your deep core muscles is critical for running throughout your lifespan. And that, I feel like the big bad wolf a little bit with that news. Trying some interval running potentially before that 12 weeks. And there's a great study that was done in 2019 by Goom et al. It's a good read. It's the first of its kind about postpartum return to run, which is wild, 2019. And they have some really great guidelines about, here are some movements that you should be able to complete with good form. So a single leg heel raise, a single leg chair squat, a side lying hip abduction, and a single leg bridge. And you should be able to do 20 repetitions, again, with good form, engaging the muscles well. And that is a sign that your body is kind of ready to start running again.
So if someone believes they are ready to start running again, but maybe they weren't, are there specific signs or things that you notice that happen?
Yeah. The same signs and symptoms as I mentioned before. So the peeing your pants, pain anywhere, heaviness. And then one that I will add is doming or coning in the abdominal wall. So that could be a sign of abdominal separation. So it looks like a tenting down the middle of your core.
So once again, I'm realizing I did everything wrong. Somehow I'm still here. No, but I think I had my kids in 15 and 17, so I'm glad a few years after that we've had some better guidelines here, because I don't know if any of you experienced the same thing, but exactly, it was 6 weeks and it was like, go ahead, go do it. Do what you do. You know, you're fit, human, go do what you have to do. And I think it's interesting. I'm sure you probably can connect the dots between pushing that then and then the downstream effects, right? As you're saying, you know, how some of these muscles are not coordinated to be doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that we might not see something for a while that becomes an issue with it. So I think that's a great message. You don't have to be the big bad wolf for saying 12 weeks. Wait. We have our whole lives to run, right? So I think that's great to get that message out there, because I don't think it's out there as it should be.
Yeah. And particularly, too, if there's been any tearing in the perineum after a C-section, if you're breastfeeding. Those are other reasons to wait a little bit longer. Your hormones are still all over the map when you're breastfeeding, so it can contribute to more laxity in your ligaments still too. Yep.
And I often see people asking me questions about running and breastfeeding, and that you're never more of a metabolic furnace than if you're trying to run and also produce milk. It is absolutely unbelievable the amount of nutrition that body needs, and I think we just normalize running, we normalize breastfeeding, and we don't realize the impact that has, and then we can get ourselves into some underfueling and some injuries and all that kind of stuff. Our bodies are crazy. They can do some really cool stuff, but we need that education on what is the appropriate step from a nutrition standpoint and, you know, a PT standpoint.
While you brought up nutrition, Megan, I'm going to ask you, so we talked about some of the changes that need to be made when you're pregnant from the PT standpoint, but can you tell us a little bit from a nutrition standpoint?
So the actual pregnancy piece of nutrition is kind of graded throughout the trimesters, which makes sense, right? So there's certain micronutrients, macronutrients that change throughout. The demand changes throughout the 3 trimesters of pregnancy. So in the first one, our energy needs aren't significantly higher. And most of the time we don't feel great. So when people are like, you know, I am not eating well, I still remember my first OB visit with my husband was like, she's not eating any vegetables anymore. And she used to eat vegetables. I'm very concerned. And I literally wanted to be like, oh my, please, I hope they realize that I'm a dietitian. But anyway, so, you know, that's common, right? And these babies are beautiful beings that can take exactly what they need for mom, and then mom might be depleted, but baby's gonna get what they need in that first trimester, right? Now we know that some micronutrients are increased, so we need more folate, we know that, right? Folic acid. Iron needs are increased, calcium and vitamin D for bone health are increased, and then obviously fluid needs start to increase as well. But really it's just kind of persevering through those symptoms of that first trimester, and then second and third is where our energy needs start to increase. So it's roughly 300 calories in the second trimester and 500 in the third trimester, which I don't know about you guys, I was hungry. So I was like, that was no problem. It was very easy to, kind of scale that up. So most people do a pretty decent job with the energy piece. And then, as we know, we want some omega-3, we want some choline for both mom's brain and baby's brain development. So there are some little things that we might want to supplement with. But for the most part, as long as there's no complications like hyperemesis where we're getting sick all the time, most people get the energy they need when they're pregnant just because most people feel a little more hungry. But I have worked with some people that are still running a lot throughout pregnancy, and that, making sure mom is gaining adequate weight throughout that is obviously a big piece too.
So Britta, I'd like to go back to postpartum. You talked a little bit about when someone should come to see you. How long should they expect to need to see you? Like, how often is it? And then how long of a duration after that?
Yeah. It's very individualized. I think usually I would see someone once a week for a little while, maybe 4 to 6 weeks, to kind of establish a good home plan. My job is to give you the tools to heal yourself, and you do the work. And so at that point, when we've established a good home program, moving to every 2 weeks, and then from there, maybe once a month check-in. So it totally depends, but...
Does insurance typically cover this? I know there's a bajillion different type of insurance, but in your experience, is it usually covered if say, someone listening wants this, if they ask their doctor for the referral, do you typically see that that's something that is covered well or no?
Yeah, usually it is, especially postpartum care. You've probably met your deductible.
Fair.
But it can be a little tougher with prenatal care. I think we're still trying to push more for that. It's not as common, but I think we're getting there.
Do we want to switch to another part of life, menopause? Talk a little bit about that. Britta, in your experience, what changes have you seen that need to be made with someone in that stage of life?
Yeah. So perimenopause is a time when estrogen is decreasing in the body, and that is correlated with a decrease in muscle mass and a decrease in bone density. So those are the big ones that I usually talk about with patients. So the big thing is strength training. 2 to 3 times a week, working up toward lifting heavy weights. Dumbbells, barbells, kettlebells. That's the big message.
So I feel like people ask me this type of stuff about nutrition all the time, and I cringe. So you can cringe at me for asking this question, but I keep seeing women in like the menopausal stage on Instagram wearing weighted vests. How do you feel about walking in a weighted vest?
Good question.
You can tell me not
I think
to
good.
talk.
I haven't looked at any research yet, but it is increasing the load, resistance. I've been baby wearing in postpartum, and I truly think it's helped me regain strength and stability. So he's getting heavier by the week. So.
Right? It's like this gradual increase in weightlifting as the baby grows. Yeah.
And Megan, for you in this stage of life, what are you seeing or what are you suggesting to your one-on-one clients when they're in this phase of life?
I'm seeing so much confusion. People don't know what to do. They don't know how to eat. They don't know who to listen to. What supplements do I need? I don't have the support from my doctors. I'm seeing a lot of confusion in like the menopausal stage for women. I will say I think it's going to change, kind of like what we're hearing about my pelvic lack of PT, and a few years later we're getting review articles on it all. So I think we're going to start to see some better treatments and better standards of care for that. But so far it's just been like, hey, deal with it, right? Figure it out. Sorry you feel this way. So I think when I'm working with folks, everyone seems to have different types of symptoms, and I think the biggest message is, yes, we have these declining hormones. But in that perimenopausal stage, there's 1 month that maybe they're declined, and the next month they're totally normal. So it's like this swing of like, you don't want to be supplementing anything yet. So understanding that, I think it's looking at what individual symptoms are you specifically having, right? That I work with my one-on-one clients. Like some people aren't sleeping well. So if you're not sleeping well, your food cravings are different, your appetite's different, you want sugar, your blood sugar's not well managed by your body. So it's looking at those types of things and focusing on maybe the main ailment that you're having versus like, hey, every perimenopausal menopausal woman needs this supplement, right? And it's kind of looking at that. Or some people, it's just fatigue, even though they're sleeping okay, right? So it's looking at, okay, how can we break up our meals and our snacks and the composition of those things to try to support your energy throughout the day. So I wish I had, I think I'd be a bajillionaire if I had the magic wand to help everyone in that stage of life, because right now I just don't think we have the resources widely known that we need. So right now it really is a little bit rogue of okay, how are you experiencing this change and what can we do to try to help with some of those pieces and parts? And then two, hearing about what people are doing, right? People in California are doing one thing, and so, working with people all over, it's very interesting. So then sometimes it's helpful to help an individual client kind of vouch for themselves or fight for themselves with their actual practitioner. So sometimes it's just aiming people with the knowledge of what to ask for, to kind of figure out where you may be in that whole cycle to figure out what happens next. Yeah.
So, Britta, we talked a lot about some of the specifics in each trimester and postpartum. If you could tell someone who was pregnant maybe one or two things that you really want them to do, what would that be?
I think don't always Kegel. It's not good for everyone. If you have pelvic floor tightness, it's not helpful to strengthen an already tight muscle. So you have to learn to relax first. Number two, I talked to Dre from Mill City Running about this. In third trimester, I liked her idea of tapering your running toward childbirth. So potentially doing less mileage, less duration and intensity, and sprinkling in more mobility, breath work. Just think about it. I think it's like a detraining plan, and then the return to run postpartum is the retraining or the getting back to it. Yeah.
How good were you at taking your own advice during pregnancy?
Good question. I did run twice a week until week 26. And I will admit that I had to have my perinatal chiropractor had a real talk with me. And she's like, that if I was having heaviness and pressure. She's like, that you shouldn't be running right now. I was doing planks and I was having major doming. I was doing box jumps at Alter and was having that same pressure. And she had to talk me down. You know better. So it was hard for me too. And I started to practice what I preach after that point.
Megan, if you could go back in time and tell pregnant Megan something, what would it be?
I don't know if you could have told pregnant Megan anything. No, I mean, yeah, I think taking a global, a step back, right? And this too shall pass. It is such a small blip in your life for such an amazing product, right? I would probably go back and be like, Megan, chill out. You don't need to keep doing X, Y, and Z. Rest. This is the time that your body needs to rest. Give it a break, sleep in, don't get up and work out before work, But I think when we're in that moment, we've all had that, right? In hindsight, I would have done that a little differently. When we're in that moment, it's hard. So I think I love that you had someone in your life to be like, no, please stop. I mean, I told my OB I was having, pubic symphysis pain. He's like, oh, okay. All right. That was it. No guidance of how to change things, So I think we need to make sure that if we're the type of person like pregnant Megan was, we need to surround ourselves with people smarter than us in that area to help us, to rein us in a little bit, to talk some sense into us. And it just like raising a kid, right? It takes a village. So we need a village to help us get there and get through it as healthy as we possibly can. And I love that Britta and your entire all your colleagues in the pelvic floor. Like these resources are available to us now, so we just need to advocate for ourselves and get into their doors.
And I do want to say that staying active during pregnancy is so important. I feel like I've been a little doom and gloom today. People come to me with symptoms, and so that's my lens. And I stay active as much as you can. Childbirth is like a marathon. It requires so much mental and physical stamina, and you are all strong and determined, and that will just benefit you so much in childbirth and doing all the things you need to do with a baby.
Yeah, so I think I know the answer to this question, but similar to advice you would give to someone pregnant, is there like one or two things you want someone to know postpartum?
I really want to underline the rest part of the first 6 weeks. It's really hard to see. You can't see your insides and what your ligaments and connective tissues have gone through in growing a baby. And when your placenta detaches, it's a gaping wound that no one can see and you can't see, and you might feel good. Your tissues are still very much healing. It takes 6 to 8 weeks for soft tissues to heal. And so giving yourself that time and your body, like that respect, is so important. If that didn't happen for you, don't worry. And trying to think if there's one other thing. I mean, always listening to your body, which can be just really hard, right? Listen to the messages that your body is giving you. Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I think this was super informative, and I mean, I learned a lot. So, thank you for being here.
Yeah. Thank you guys all, the rest of you, for being here. We have the space for quite a while. There is food. There are lots of beverages. So if anybody wants to hang out with us, we're going to be here. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Oh, wait. Don't do that. I forgot. We have to take a selfie of everybody.
Is it ever too late to seek pelvic floor help or assistance, or is it just kind of like, well, it's been 3 years, best of luck?
No, absolutely. At any point across the lifespan, you're postpartum for life. And so, yeah, come see me at any point. It really isn't ever too late to work on these things. The longer that you've had symptoms, maybe the longer it takes to heal. And though, I believe in that healing for everybody, no matter when you come in.
All right, I'm next. And Britta, I actually saw you back in 2020, so it's nice to see you again. Hi. She was a great pelvic PT.
Thank you.
So I want to ask, it's less of a question for me and more just the audience. So I think you kind of remember my story, but sometimes we end up with C-sections unexpectedly. So I kind of have a two-part question. One, do you have any advice for people who are maybe planning on a vaginal birth, just to kind of keep in the back of their mind if that becomes part of their path? And then secondly, for postpartum recovery for a C-section, what special recommendations might you have for somebody who has had a C-section?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. Yes. C-sections we're so grateful, right? Like keeping baby and mama alive. And maybe that isn't always the plan. Sometimes it is, and it can be a beautiful birth. I think knowing that it is a surgery and may require a little bit more time for healing postpartum, having that expectation. Coughing might hurt, sneezing might hurt, placing your hand over the scar or a pillow can help with that, just reducing that pressure. Asking for more help from partners. And then around 6 weeks, I typically would start a C-section massage and kind of teach you how to do that yourself. And so moving the tissues with your fingertips to improve blood flow and mobility can be really helpful to reduce any discomfort. Sometimes nerves can get trapped in there. It helps connect to the deep core muscles, kind of loosening that scar tissue. Do you have anything to add?
Again, I needed to see you after my 2 C-sections. This is just the theme of the night. No, I think help was a huge piece. I mean, I couldn't even get out of bed, right? It's like rolling to your side and like propping yourself out of bed to nurse your kid. And so there's a lot of help that's required when you're planning on a vaginal birth and go down that C-section route. I remember I just cried when they told me I had to do it, and my OB rolled her eyes, and I literally looked at her and I was like, just give me a second, right? So it's a shock if that's not what you're planning on, but like you were saying, like it is a beautiful way to also have healthy babies. So, but you do just need more help and need more time.
Just question regarding perimenopause. How does that exactly change your workouts? Or is there workouts, do you need to change them, I guess?
Yeah, good question. I would say potentially decreasing mileage. This is so individual. Thinking about doing something like hill walking that can give you that same kind of scratch that same itch of getting that cardiovascular burn, that isn't so much high impact. Find a hill, walk up it a few times. It can be really fun. I did some of that during pregnancy when I wasn't running anymore. Or find a set of stairs. And of course, low impact options too, elliptical, biking. But I think in terms of running, I think running as much as you can, yes. And it is a repetitive sagittal plane, so it's a straightforward movement that kind of uses the same muscles over and over again. You're placing impact through one leg repeatedly. And that's a lot of load to withstand. So I think it can be just a little more on the risky side. That being said, it also is very helpful to bear load through your joints and your bones for bone development and for your mental health and your cardiovascular health. And we know that at the age of 50 and above, there's a higher prevalence of cardiovascular disease and cancer, and so running is a great way to combat all of that. So it's not an easy answer, but hopefully that helps.
And I've seen a lot of women, again, back to what we were saying before, everyone's symptoms are very different going through perimenopause, but I've seen a lot of women finally prioritize the strength training piece or Pilates or things like that to help get more of that strength and hang on to more of that muscle mass in a period of our life where we may be prone to losing a little bit more of it. And I've seen a lot of success with that. I also see some things out there as common knowledge of women shouldn't keep running like they want to through this time. And I think, to kind of piggyback off what you said, if it's working, right? And I don't think we should have a fear. If this is what clears our mind going for a run, now all of a sudden we're worried, this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing in this period of life, and there's already all these hormonal changes. I think we just need to be honest with ourselves of what feels good to us right now through this change of life. And not necessarily be fearful of I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that, because I think that just adds to the stress of that period, making sure that the movement that we're doing on a daily basis is supportive of our mental health, our physical health, and kind of the same theme of everything we've said tonight about just really listening to our bodies and, getting that support and maybe adding in, like I said, some more of that strength training, engagement, that kind of stuff that maybe we've pushed to the side for a little while.
Hello. I actually have two questions as well. First, having a planned C-section, would you say there's some benefits to doing some pelvic floor PT leading up to that surgery to make it successful as well as the return? And then the second is nutrition. I'm pregnant and 40, so considered geriatric. And so kind of the returning to run, breastfeeding, nutrition aspect, does it change as opposed to like a 25-year-old giving birth and their nutrition?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, definitely. I mean, our pelvic floor is so vital to everything that we do, being that it's part of our core and we poop and pee every day, hopefully. And just the stress and strain of pregnancy and how that affects our pelvic floor. You know, I think any pregnant person could benefit from knowing more about how their pelvic floor is functioning. And in terms of recovery, I have seen so when our body goes through, I mean, say a trauma, I know it's a surgery. Yeah, even a planned one could be traumatic. The body can kind of go into this protective guarding mode of you're in pain, you can barely roll out of bed, so I'm going to clench and guard my muscles, and a lot of times the pelvic floor takes on that role, and that's true of any stressors. Outside of perinatal time, people can have clenching in their pelvic floors. And so I do see that in the clinic, is that kind of pattern. And so I think doing prenatal PT to just understand that, know what that feels like, can help in that recovery piece for sure. And then it's relatively common to have painful intercourse postpartum, whether it's vaginal or C-section. So just know that that's maybe the first couple times to expect a little discomfort. And though if it persists, that's not normal, and that's another reason to seek out our help. Yeah.
And as far as nutrition goes, just like we can get away with a lot of things in our 20s that we can't in our 40s, same thing goes for this, right? So I think it's just being really diligent about kind of, my mind goes two places: one, muscle mass, and two, bone density. So we know, especially when we're breastfeeding, our hormones are low, especially our estrogen, which isn't great for long-term bone health, also isn't great for hanging on to muscle mass, right? So what are we doing to kind of combat those two things? And this is true for anyone nursing, not just someone who's 40. But again, it just becomes that much more imperative because we know that our hormones are going to take a dip a little sooner than a 25-year-old having a baby, right? So what that would mean was just making sure that you're really supplementing with vitamin D, knowing your levels, knowing how much do we need to be supplementing, and then making sure we're eating enough dietary calcium, and if not, then go to a supplement. I always really try to get people to get it through food first, but obviously we need to get it from somewhere. And then the protein piece to hang on to muscle mass. So it really is very difficult from the hormonal profile when we're nursing to put on any muscle mass, but we can decrease how much muscle mass we're losing through that nursing phase, which would be crucial. And then our protein needs are already increased nursing by about 30 grams a day. So it's just really making sure that 3 solid meals of 30 to 40 grams of protein, some protein at snacks, and then obviously enough total energy in the background, which, your appetite will be lovely as you're nursing. So I'm not as much worried about the energy piece, but yeah, just kind of balance that out.
I also have 2 questions. The first one is just when you say heavy weights, what's a good general number? And then in terms of, we talked about relaxin in pregnancy, and I've had an ACL surgery, and I've just always been curious if there's any research or any conversations or nutrition changes when something when your ligaments are looser if you in pregnancy.
So from a nutrition standpoint, with the relaxin, I haven't seen a whole lot of research or anything if there's a nutrition intervention to help with any of that. Muscle strength and support around that joint, I would say. So obviously that goes back to, we're not getting enough protein, we're losing muscle mass, so that timing of making sure we're getting it throughout the day, kind of what I was just saying, would probably be my biggest thing, but I don't know if you have anything to add in your...
Yeah, I would say I do some Pilates-based rehab And that is one of the best tools for working on those stabilizing muscles around the joints. Absolutely. And then your first question, how heavy to go? Yeah, I would say, so the ACSM recommends for a strength training routine to do 2 to 3 sets of 8 to 12 reps of an exercise. And so when you're doing that dosage, you should feel like completely fatigued by the end of those reps. Like you couldn't do another bicep curl. That could be tricky to figure out. But if you could knock out 20 reps at that weight, definitely go up. Does that help?
Thank you. Hi. I'm just wondering about for menopausal women around nutrition, especially protein and any other other things that we might lose, because I've never really heard about what we should change, and especially as us active girls right here, we're wondering what we would need.
Well, the one really encouraging thing, I think we're all kind of scared of getting older and told at X age, it just all goes down the toilet, right? Or other words. And I think when you really look at the research, most non-running, right? We're a very active group in here, are activity tanks through perimenopause and menopause because they're tired and you're not sleeping and you didn't really like to exercise anyways, so that's an easy thing to get rid of, right? But when we look at women who stay active through that perimenopause and menopausal stage, we don't see as great of body composition changes. We don't see some of those huge, I'm gaining weight overnight, we don't see some of those complaints. So I think first and foremost, it's staying active and keep doing what you love, right? Whatever that is from a running standpoint, I think that's the most important thing to do. And if some of your symptoms are keeping you from that, it's looking at that and trying to figure out, okay, maybe we do need to adjust on nights when we're up since 2 a.m. and can't fall back asleep, right? Let's not go run in the morning, but, being mindful about those things. From a nutrition standpoint then, kind of back to what we were talking about, it's bone health and muscle mass are the two things that we see really start to be impacted by those hormones declining. So when we're thinking about what do we do, I think it's great to get your DEXA to find out where is your baseline bone density, because there are things we can do from a strength training standpoint to increase that bone density. And then if our serum vitamin D is low, we don't absorb as much calcium from our diet, in our intestines, right? So a lot of us are walking around with low serum vitamin Ds and just don't really know it. So getting that checked yearly and supplementing to keep that over 30, some doctors even like it in the 40s and 50s, is really helpful for bone health as we start to get older. I know you guys have nasty winters as well. I'm in Ohio. I totally understand that. And most of us are deficient, right? There's not many of us who don't need to be supplementing. So knowing where that number is so that if you need a more aggressive supplementation, instead of just being oh, Megan said to take it, I'm going to take 1,000 IUs, knowing where you're at so we can supplement appropriately. And then getting that dietary calcium in is the second piece, right? Then we can actually absorb it and get that in. Typically, we say 3 servings of a high calcium food a day, and if you're not, then at the nighttime, take a calcium chew or something like that on those nights. And then the next thing is protein, right? We just know that our muscle protein synthesis or recovery just gets harder and harder as we get older, especially as our hormones decrease. So maybe 20 grams of protein was enough to recover our muscles in our 20s. Now we need 40, right? And when we're, I don't know about you guys, but that's a lot of protein, right? That feels a little bit like a job sometimes. So just being really mindful and trying to create some habits around making sure you're hitting your protein needs 3 times a day to hang on to that lean muscle mass is probably the 2 biggest, most important things to check the box on for just overall health. And then 2, staying injury-free, both bone and muscle injuries. Those 2 things can help a ton with.
All right, I think that was it. But like Megan said, we'll have this space for a little bit longer. So if you have any more questions, please stay and talk to the Megs and Britta. And thank you all for coming.